Lord Chair, meet at 2 o'clock. Ready when you are.
Thank you, Chris. Are we ready for recording? Yep. Okay. May I welcome all members and officers to the hybrid meeting of the Cross-Cutting Resources and Business Overview and Scrutiny Committee. It doesn't get any easier to say. This meeting is able to be viewed live by members of the press and public today. Therefore, may I welcome anyone that may be watching remotely. A recording of this meeting will be made available on the Council's webcasting and YouTube channels after the meeting has concluded, should anyone else wish to view it. Please be aware that this meeting is being transcribed only for the purpose of producing the minutes. This transcript will be deleted once the committee approves the minutes, and the transcript should not be downloaded by anyone other than Democratic Services. To confirm, as a council, we welcome the use of the Welsh language within our public meetings, but I can confirm that I've not received any notification or request to use Welsh today. Therefore, the meeting will be conducted in English only. May I remind members to refrain from using the chat facility and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you wish to speak. Please could you also keep your microphone muted when not speaking so there aren't any interruptions encountered. May I also remind members that as per statutory guidance made under Section 4 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011 and our formally adopted hybrid meeting policy, any member attending a meeting remotely must be able to be seen and heard by the members and officers who are attending the meeting, as well as by members of the public viewing the meeting. So can I ask that you all please use your cameras for the duration of the meeting. Moving on to the agenda. Could Chris, our Democratic Service Officer, confirm if we received any apologies? Chris?
We have, Chair, we have apologies from Councillors Giles Davis, Carl Gordon, Nicholas Simons and Lucy Williams.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other apologies to be passed on from members present? No? Okay, thank you. Moving on then to the next item on the agenda, the declarations of interest. Could I ask if members have any declarations of interest to make, please? I see no hands, so okay. So item 3, the confirmation of minutes of the meeting of the 28th of the 1st, 2025. Members, do you approve these as minutes as an accurate record? Yes, I have hands up. Okay. Anyone against? No, I think those are carried. If we can note that, thanks. All right. So, item 4 is the action sheet from that meeting. Please could members confirm if they have any questions and whether they're happy to move the action sheet. All okay to move? Yep, I see hands. Fine, I think we note that as well then, Geraint. Thank you. So, item 5, the main substantive item, is communication and engagement strategy and approach for Torfaen and County Borough Council deal with the community. So just to remind us that the purpose of this report is to give the Cross-Cutting Resources and Business Overview and Scrutiny Committee the opportunity to scrutinise, challenge, influence and make suggestions to the communications and engagement strategy and approach for development of the Council's deal with the community. I'd like to welcome officers present at the meeting and if they bring them, I'd ask them to introduce themselves as they come in. That would be great. But I would like now to hand over to the leader and to Neil Jones to introduce the report. So, Neil.
Good afternoon, councillors. Today I'll introduce the report on the Torfaen deal, but with your permission, we will use our latest slide deck as the basis for our presentation, which will help explain our approach to the Torfaen deal. Before I start, I'd like to invite the leader just to say a few words.
Thanks, Neil, and thanks, members. I don't think the importance of this approach can really be understated for the future of our communities. And also, I think importantly, if we're serious about our county plan and the ambitions that we have in there, the objectives we have in there, and our Marmot ambitions as well, with our desire to really make progress on those indicators like the Healthy Life Expectancy Indicator that of course is so much a concern. So I think the risks really of not being innovative are really to the fore of my mind there. We can't just continue to do the same things and expect different outcomes. We have to try and do things differently, try and do things better, and work to tackle some of those stated ambitions that we have and deliver the outcomes that our communities deserve. We want to be an enabler in that. We want to work with our communities, work with their strengths, and get away from the old sort of paradigm of public service being done unto people, as opposed to things that are done with people. We want to work with the strengths of our communities, which I know are huge, and help support them to deliver better outcomes for the people we serve. We're already doing that in places. I think we've got some great examples to tell, but I want to make that more systemic, more the normal way of doing things, and not just examples of where it can work. I realise that takes change, that takes a different mindset, and that takes us making sure our policies and our practices align with that ambition. But I think that the wins that we can achieve if we do so are really significant. And there are so many win-wins in this. I think one of the things that's impressed me so far about the way we've approached federation is the principle of mutual learning with our colleagues in Blaenau Gwent, but also the principle of trying to work with our staff, with our trade unions as well, and try and make savings from the top of the organisation, not as many organisations seem to make savings starting from the coalface. So there's lots of stuff to unpack there, and I'll pass you over back to Neil and to Stephen to take you through some of the work we've been doing. But I hope members can see that the opinions we've expressed as members have been fed into this process to try and deliver something that we'll be proud of for our communities.
Thank you, Leader. Okay, I'll quickly go through the report. You've received the report. I'll quickly go through it. The bulk of what we'll talk to will be within the presentation slide deck we have today. As set out in the report, the key messages are we've declared ourselves a Marmot Council to reduce health inequalities and improve life chances across the borough. So a programme of work is under development focused on a new contract between the council and its communities, and this new deal underpins the transformation strategy and it is aligned with the Marmot principles. Underpinning the deal are 5 missions contained within the presentation, and they'll be the strategic drivers of our transformation, and the Scrutiny Committee will play a critical role to ensure our communication engagement plan is robust, inclusive and aligned with our transformation goals. Just as a bit of background, as you're familiar, we declared ourselves a Marmot Council to address health inequalities that exist in the borough. It's now the 5 missions, which are early years building bright futures, inspiring lifelong learning, ambition and resilience, well-being through community leadership, thriving economy, vibrant places, empowered communities, shared power and success. And our engagement approach to the deal is designed to build trust, foster shared responsibility and empower communities to co-design and co-deliver services. The deal will therefore be co-produced and will depend on strong, ongoing communication and meaningful engagement with the community and residents, elected members, community organisations, partners, stakeholders and the Council's workforce. Just with regard to consultation, while the deal will be focused on Torfaen's communities, the federation between Blaenau Gwent and Torfaen has so far proved to be an effective vehicle in developing these plans. And what we present today is the Torfaen deal. As you'll see on screen, we have created branding for the Torfaen deal and the Blaenau Gwent deal. And we expect this to be a way of working that will continue with further benefits of closer working being realised. Just on some of the key implications and risks, trust and legitimacy. This strategy must demonstrate that the deal is co-produced, not imposed. Culture change, that our communications are a lever for embedding the Council's rebel culture and shifting from transactional services to relationship working. Performance and accountability, that engagement is tied to performance reporting cycles, service plans, and the health determinants research collaboration, evaluation framework, and system-wide transformation. The strategy supports the delivery of the 5 key missions. The Scrutiny Committee are asked today to review this report and this slide deck that we'll go through now, detailing our proposals, and we'll work towards the launch of a deal between the Council and the community, and we'll take on board your suggestions for improvement. Stephen will start going through the presentation.
Thank you, Neil. Good afternoon, members. It's good to be with you. Yeah, just take you through the presentation. I'll skip through the beginning of it because some of it just sets out the principles around Marmot, which you will be familiar with, and some of the challenges that we face across public services. And, of course, you'll be very familiar with that too, but I will nevertheless just skip through. There we go. So, just a reminder, as Neil said, although we're entering into a federated model, which we hope to take full advantage of as part of future working operationally, we do remain 2 sovereign councils, and whilst there are those opportunities to scale up within that federated operating model, ultimately that sovereignty matters to us, and in effect, the plan here is to take a shared approach to delivering a deal in each place, and that's reflected there, and the benefits that we're realising across all of those bullet points are listed on the right-hand side there. Just a reminder of the challenges that we face. Public services in the UK, there is a crisis of rising demand and growing public dissatisfaction. Current approaches, we feel, are not fit for purpose, failing to address rising demand under the current arrangements, and will not be able to reform top-down. And the impact, of course, is the thing that matters most. Impact upon our communities. Communities face rising inequality. There is reduced resilience across communities, and they feel there's a lack of influence over services, and our traditional models have not really built enough trust, empowerment, or local capacity or resilience. In terms of our local economy, there is an economic underinvestment and disadvantage across regions too, partly because of a feeling of being disconnected between the local business opportunity and growth, and to some degree the bureaucracy and a lack of engagement have made it more difficult for businesses to thrive. In terms of impact upon our partnerships, we operate, of course, we've done some work in all of these areas to try to make improvements best as we can, but fragmented systems, siloed working, and a lack of shared purpose mean that there is limited impact in terms of our ability to deliver across the voluntary sector and with our partners. There's been insufficient alignment with national ambitions and a lack of system-wide prevention, it's fair to say. And then there are just some broader cross-cutting impacts: shrinking budgets, escalating demand, crisis management culture led to service reductions, impact upon our staff, and ultimately worsening outcomes across our communities. And we are ultimately in this vicious cycle of unmet need, strategic paralysis, and this loss of public trust. And there's just a slide there that covers that in slightly more detail. So we've committed ourselves to take on these challenges. We've been working on these in these areas over the past couple of years, of course, to Marmot. Why Marmot? Well, we're committed to long-term, equitable and sustainable change that improves lives at a population level. Marmot, just to set out what we really talk about there, is that the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, age, are the root causes of inequality and poor well-being. Certainly in around 75% of the cases, it's less to do with biology and less to do with the services that people receive from health, more to do with these conditions in which people are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. Marmot matters to us because what it enables us to do is to introduce proportionate universalism. What this really means is that we can ensure that everyone gets support across our communities. That's the universal aspect of it, but those who need more help get more help, and that's the proportionate part. Marmot is evidence-based. It's backed by decades of research now showing that health outcomes are shaped more by social and economic factors than they are by healthcare alone. If delivered effectively, it helps us to deliver that national strategy at a local level, provides a common framework, of course, for us to align and join up with our partners. It is locally adaptable. We can adapt our policies, our service delivery, our service design, and our place-based partnerships around it. And of course, it focuses increasingly upon prevention, so a real shift of emphasis from crisis response to early help and resilience. And that's just a piece of information that's drawn down from the academic research, which shows that the social, economic and environmental determinants, the wider determinants as they're known, will impact on around 40 to 50% of health outcomes, health behaviours, which themselves are strongly influenced by those wider determinants, will be around 30 to 40%, and leaving a minority, a much smaller part of the jigsaw puzzle there, access to medical treatment or the biological factors at a much lower level, which is why it's important for us as councils, of course, to take the lead in respect of this, taking on that role of frontline defence for the public sector. So, the deal, I'm going to carry on here for just a couple more slides before I hand over to Neil. So what is the deal? Well, the deal is a new social contract between the council and its communities, built on trust, shared responsibility and collective action. People may be familiar with the Wigan deal, very much built upon the same premise. We'll talk a little bit more about Wigan at the end of the presentation, Neil will. But it's something that you may be familiar with, and the success that Wigan had by taking a similar approach, albeit that they started in a different position to us, but nevertheless we've learned the lessons from Wigan, and we've incorporated some of that into what we're doing here today. Our vision then, a future without inequality, where everyone thrives in a fair, inclusive and resilient community. That's the deal vision. And our aim is to create lasting change by building trust, fostering shared responsibility and driving innovation through strong collaboration between the council, importantly our residents and our partners. Why the deal again? So what does it bring? Well, the deal can be the glue that really binds the whole system together, and importantly for us, that's across both people and place. This is not just about the work that we do with our residents, it is about the way that we design our services, support our residents through those services, the way we design and commit ourselves in respect of all aspects of our planning, our economic delivery, etc. It's co-produced, that matters greatly, so services are designed and delivered with residents, much more, not just for them. Preventative is at the heart of the deal. Every service area across the council is expected to reduce future demand by investing in community strengths and early support. Empowering, of course, communities having more influence through devolved budgets, local governance and shared decision making. We can, of course, measure it as part of that work with the national team, the regional teams, but also local shared performance frameworks which can be shared across our partners as well as those inside directorates within the council, can track progress and impact. And it's resilient. It really builds upon community capacity to withstand crisis and reduce the reliance upon those statutory services. Neil mentioned these earlier, so I won't labour them any more than just going through them as headlines again. The deal will be delivered through 5 missions. Mission 1, the early years, building bright futures. Mission 2, inspiring lifelong learning, ambition and resilience. Mission 3, well-being through community leadership. Mission 4, thriving economy, vibrant places. And Mission 5, empowered communities and shared power and success. And you'll see from that that the first three of these missions very much focused upon the work that we do across our communities with the people that live within our communities, and then missions 4 and 5 focused heavily around the work that we do in designing place and working with the businesses the developing the economic and vibrant places as a result of work that we can do in place. I'm going to hand over now to Neil, who's going to talk us through the actual engagement plan around the deal. And, of course, just to let you know, members, I'm here with Jason O'Brien and David Leach, strategic directors from across adults and communities with David, and children, young people and families with Jason. I'm happy to answer any questions that you've got at the end of the presentation.
Thanks, Stephen. So Stephen has touched on it, but what is the deal? We realise we've got to try and make this quite easy to understand for our stakeholders. So the deal is our new relationship between the Council, our communities and partners. It's a social contract built on trust, shared responsibility and collective action. It's a commitment to doing things differently by working together to deliver our missions. It's not a project, it's a movement, and it's a mindset. At its heart, the deal is about sharing power through devolving budgets, local decision-making, and a belief that communities know best what works for them. It's about working in partnership to reduce health inequalities, to improve well-being, and build resilient, empowered, strong communities that take greater pride in their places. It's about improved services and trust, so designing, co-designing services with residents, leading to better alignment with community needs and increased public satisfaction. It's about protecting the services that communities value. Lower demand on emergency support helps safeguard the services that everyone uses and appreciates. It's about empowerment and participation. Residents will be invited to shape their communities through forums, surveys, direct engagement, fostering pride and ownership. It's about transparency and accountability. Residents will see how their inputs shape decisions via feedback loops, just using that you said we did, and performance reporting. It's about sustainability and resilience. Investing in community strengths, preventative services will build long-term resilience and reduce reliance on crisis interventions. It's about better outcomes, fairer chances, communities shaping services that work for them, leading to healthier, more resilient lives. It's smarter spending, stronger communities, saving from preventions are reinvested locally, making services more sustainable. And it's about trust, pride and participation. Communities are listened to, involved and empowered to make change happen. Benefits for businesses: stronger local economy, driving sustainable growth, creating vibrant, well-connected communities where businesses can thrive. Influencing local priorities, businesses are invited to shape services and strategies through forums, networks and co-designing opportunities. Boosted via visibility and trust, so active participation can build public trust and strengthens business reputation as community-focused business. And it's reduced bureaucracy, streamlining engagement and shared governance, makes it easier for businesses to work with the Council. Further benefits for businesses: support for local enterprise, assisting the Council to invest in the local economy and encouraging residents to support local businesses. It's access to community insights, businesses benefiting from data, feedback, lived experience gathered through deep engagement with residents. It's a resilient operating environment, prevention-first strategies, reducing crisis demand, protecting infrastructure and services that support commerce. And it's delivering national ambitions locally. By aligning the Marmot principles and Welsh Government goals, businesses can help deliver inclusive growth and equity at place level. Some of the benefits for our partners: it's about delivering national and regional strategy locally, translating system-wider ambitions into real-world action through co-designed services and measurable outcomes. It's access to community insight and innovation. Deep engagement with residents unlocks lived experience, enabling smarter, more targeted interventions. It's shaping system-wide change, enabling partners to lead beyond their organisations, driving prevention, equity and resilience across the whole wellbeing system. And it's performance and risk alignment, partners benefiting from integrated performance frameworks and shared data to monitor impact and adapt strategies. It'll also strengthen local delivery and impact, so closer working and collaboration with partners to co-deliver services through the 5 missions. It'll build trust and visibility, working together visibly with communities and councils, enhances public trust and partner reputation. It'll help reduce demand and improve outcomes. Targeted prevention first model reduces pressure on all statutory services, improving outcomes and freeing up resources. And it'll influence national policy and funding. Partners contributing to learning loops and performance frameworks that shape national direction and unlocks future investment. Some of the cross-cutting benefits: cultural transformation, a shift from transactional to relationship working will improve trust, satisfaction and efficiency across all stakeholder groups. It'll be digital and data-driven innovation, enhanced use of technology and insights will support smarter decision-making and service delivery. Community-led solutions, by recognising and investing in community strengths, the deal fosters self-reliance and reduces demand on statutory services. So these are the calls to action. We want the deal to build something, but let's build something better together. Let's love our borough. Let's build greater pride in our communities. And let's unlock the potential that already exists in every street, every neighbourhood and every person. This slide outlines some of the learning that we've taken from Wigan. We had a meeting with the Assistant Chief Executive of Wigan Council, and these capture their 10 essential components to readiness. So it's having a strong narrative, a simple concept that everyone can understand, but is profound in its implications. It's a movement, not a project. This is rooted in public service values. It's why I work for the council. Leadership at every level, commitment and senior sponsorship, workforce culture change, training and core behaviours that define how we work, whatever the role. A different relationship with residents and communities, so building self-reliance and independence. Permission to work differently, so leadership backing, we will support you. Redesigning the system, testing our systems, processes and ways of working against our principles. Do they make the culture and behaviours we want more or less likely? Enabling staff with the right tools and knowledge, using new technology to support new ways of working and new roles. A new model of commissioning and community investment, market development and new arrangements for commissioning, and supportive enabling functions, breaking down barriers to progress and facilitating the change. So these are the phases that we're looking to engage our key stakeholders. These are not linear, they will be crossover in the process. But in phase 1, we very much want to come out to members, to our staff, to our partners, to our community councils, to our partner organisations. It's started, but it'll be throughout September and October. In phase 2, we want to talk about Torfaen and Blaenau Gwent deal. So we'll have public engagement across the borough, right across the borough, online, offline, face-to-face, using all our digital channels, using our platforms, but also very much getting out in front of groups to start listening to what they see as part of the deal. Phase 3 will be about agreeing the deal. That will take place in December and January. So this is what you've told us. This is what the deal looks like. Phase 4 is very much about getting ready for the deal. One of the learning points from Wigan was to ensure our staff are comfortable with standing in front of their colleagues, standing in front of the public, and being able to explain the deal and ensuring they start to have that mindset about what the deal means. Phase 5 is launching the deal, and we're hopeful that we can do that in March next year. And phase 6 will be very much about building on the examples to create case studies, to publicise the deal, and will be used to help in future internal training workshops. So what we mean by deep listening, at this phase, we certainly did not want to go to the public or to members or to partners with a defined deal. I think Stephen, in some early presentations, set out what the deal could mean, the small asks, the we wills that the council will commit to and what we would like the public to do more of. But to start off with, we want to listen to what the public have to say. So we want to ask them several questions along these lines, provocations. Describe what's good about where you live and your local community. What would you improve or change if you could? What would you be prepared to do to help make it better? What would you like to improve in your community? What could you do to improve your community? How do you live your life? What facilities do you use? What services do you use? What local groups are you involved in or support? And finally, what could the council or other partners working in your community do better? Essentially, this is part of the process, taking the next steps. We're agreeing this timetable, so we'd like your feedback on that. Does the phases, does the timetable of activity look right? And finally, feedback and questions today.
Okay. Is anybody else saying anything, or have you finished now?
All finished.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for that introduction. Before I open the meeting to members' questions, can I remind members of the opportunity to make recommendations during the course of discussions, should they wish to, with the leader and officers present, available to discuss them, or alternatively, we can formulate them at the end of discussions, bearing in mind that our focus here is around the communication strategy as the report has set out. So, open it up. I've got first Councillor Steve Evans, second Councillor McCaller.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions for me. How are we ensuring equal partnership with communities with funding as areas are not receiving equality in funding at present? That's Mission 5. Mission 1, how are we supporting families and children with support, particularly with additional needs, health issues, neurodiverse, ADHD, and also partners with the homelessness? And the third and final question I got, how do we know we have the same aligned values as Blaenau Gwent, as Torfaen needs may be different?
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Evans. I'll pass to David Leach to respond.
Thanks, Councillor Evans. I'll come in the first part of that question if I can. It's a really important one for us to draw that distinction between equality and equity. And one of the key principles that we're looking at across the whole of this community's approach in the deal is about ensuring equity. So that's this idea of what's called proportionate universalism, which means that we want to make sure that every area has the right resources at a community level to be able to succeed, but not every area needs the same investment in the same types of community resource. You may have an area that's absolutely exceptional in its community resources at supporting children and young people, but needs a bit more investment in its food provision, for example. Equally, you might have another community that needs a little bit more support around getting more involved in litter picks and environmental activity, but's brilliant at supporting older adults. So that's the core principle of equity. What we need to make sure is that when we do that assessment as part of the deal, we're ensuring that no communities are left behind in that process. And I think that's the core part of what you're asking there as a question. We'll do that by looking at the data around what those individual circumstances and challenges are in each community, so that we can build up the grants programmes and any other support around that. One final point for me to make on this is that it's really important and a core principle of the deal that we start to move some of the resource away from activity that I as an officer may be suggesting that we do and out into the community. So you'll have seen through Shared Prosperity Fund and other funding sources as growing the amount of resource that we're giving directly to community groups, but giving that clear steer as well as to what we think those challenges are in that area that we want to work with that community on. That you will see under the deal happening more and more often, where we're pushing as much resource as we can out to community groups, but with that steer about the impact that we would want to see that resource having. In terms of the second part of the question, I'll pass over to Jason.
Thank you, Councillor. In terms of the second part of the question, which was focusing on support for children and families, we already know we've got I guess, a great scheme within the local authority through the play service, and we see a significant use of volunteers throughout that process. And that's what we want to, I guess, monopolise and build upon further throughout that early years process. And the key aspect for me in terms of early years is that early identification and getting in there early or diverting early. One of the things that we are keen on focusing on is our schools as communities, and our early years and Flying Start Families First funded projects as initial indicators and organisations we can work with and develop more strongly. Obviously a great onus on partnership working for us. In terms of any early years developments and early years provision, we need to be working with our partners, particularly with health, to a greater level. But I think there's the community element of it, and that ask in terms of the deal. Like I say, I come back to that original point of our volunteers within our play service, an extensive, significant service we provide, and significant engagement from volunteers within our communities. And that's something for us to monopolise within that mission one.
I think Stephen would like to add something.
Yeah, just to pick up the final question, actually, Councillor Evans, which was on the values of the two organisations. As I said, it's important to note that actually the deal will be in each place, so each council will have its own deal. It's not perhaps beyond the realms of possibility that those deals will look quite similar in each place, not least of all because our challenges across our two boroughs is very similar. Equally, with proportionate universalism, our approach, which is aligned to Marmot, and both councils have already signed up to Marmot, which means that from that values perspective, we're already aligned. And of course, what we want to make sure that we do is support our communities universally, but target those who perhaps need more support at the time that they need it, so that we can promote that inequality and tackle and push that independence back into those communities. Equally, when obviously there would have been some decisions that members would have made around aligned values when the two councils first worked together. I think that's fair to say. And one of the very first things that we did when I got into post across the two authorities was to review both county plans. And although they're written quite differently, ultimately what they are is focused around quite similar priorities. Blaenau Gwent has 4 priorities, Torfaen has 9 wellbeing objectives focused in our county plan. But ultimately, when you boil them down, both councils are really looking to do more with communities. Both councils want their places to be thriving. They want to be working much more closely with their communities to achieve that. So all of this is built very much upon 2 plans that, when you boil them down, do look quite similar. So I'm pretty certain that from that perspective, we are as aligned as we will ever need to be for the purposes of delivering a deal in each place, but that helps us operationally, there's no doubt about it.
Okay. Councillor Evans, I think the leader would like to comment briefly as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a good question about alignment of values there, because I think a certain amount of alignment is helpful, but I don't think it's necessarily essential to be completely aligned. I'll give the example of the Revenues and Benefits Service, which we've run jointly with Monmouthshire for a number of years, very successfully. Members will know the outcomes there. We're regularly first and second in terms of the DHP awards and in terms of various other measures about getting benefits out to people. That has worked well, partly because there is a shared belief in the benefits of that joint service, but it hasn't necessarily depended on us being equally committed to some of the outcomes. For example, in years gone by, we'd put more money into our discretionary housing payments fund, which allowed it to be administered in the same way in Torvine, but to a higher level. It didn't necessarily require both councils to want to deliver it to the same level. So there's things that I think do need to be aligned, but it's not necessarily a deal breaker if people want to do. Let's say we wanted to. I won't give an example because it will be a hostage to fortune. But if we wanted to discharge a certain surface to a higher level, there's nothing in Federation that stops us doing that. Albeit we'd have to make the resource choice about what we wanted to do to a lower level in order to free up the resource.
Okay. So, you happy with that, Councillor Evans?
Yes, thank you for everybody's answer. Much appreciated. Thank you.
And just as we've got a number of members wanting to ask, so if I could ask officers to keep it fairly concise, that would be wonderful. Councillor Horler. Okay, thank you. We'll pass then to, if you want to come in then afterwards, I'll bring you in afterwards. Councillor Jack Jones.
You're still on mute, Janet.
You're on mute, Janet.
Sorry, can't hear you. So
you should be so lucky. My concern is, how are we going to gain the trust of our residents? It's really good what we're trying to achieve, but over recent years, councils lost trust from its residents. How are we going to get this impact over to them that it really is the best thing that, you know, they can get involved in? So that's the first question. The second question, Stephen already asked me, but again, I'm concerned with our children's and our adult services and the impact this is have. Will we have enough resources? So I'm sure Jason can come back on that for me. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. So I'll go to Jason then to start that response.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. In terms of, I guess, the children's services element of it, I think, you know, the whole premise of this is around being able to manage our demand greater, be it through children's, adults, whatever aspect of that is. We know, for example, if I just give a quick example of within education, where we've shifted some of our funding within education to deal with additional learning needs at an earlier stage. And in anticipation of doing so, it's in anticipation of heading off issues and challenges at an early juncture that then prevent children from coming into any part of the system at a later juncture at a higher level. So I think that's just a quick, succinct example of one of those changes and shifts that we're making, which again, I think in terms of, I guess, one of the other question you raised about inspiring confidence or bringing members of the community on with us, you know, we'll be able to show the impact that change in funding is having.
And I think Stephen would like to respond also.
I think just on the matter of, I suppose, on the point about rebuilding trust, I think that's a really important thing for us to focus upon. The engagement strategy that Neil presented to you is designed to exactly do that, including the "you said we did" element of it. But that "you said we did" is a fundamental strand throughout our whole performance, throughout the delivery of the deal. So it's not just about engaging and showing that we're listening at that point. It is also about then demonstrating that throughout, and of course continuing to be accountable to our members and obviously our communities that those members represent. So I think it's a great question, but I think it is built into the model that we're putting in place, Councillor.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Chair. Thanks for your really informative answers. So thank you again.
Okay, I think Neil wants to make a comment briefly also.
Yeah, just following up on the question of trust. Trust will be gained and earned by demonstrating that we've devolved budget, that we've devolved decision-making, and playing that back to communities, demonstrating through good communication, building case studies that demonstrate what is possible, and the art of the possible has already happened in many examples across the borough. We've got some fantastic examples of where communities have taken the initiative on projects. I think about the Pontier Hub. I think about our parks and the green flags we've recently had in our parks. 6 out of the 9 green flags were from community-led parks, places like Llantarnam that have taken the time, invested their time in their park, made significant improvements, and that is all about building trust. We've got other examples like the fishing down at the boating lake, where community groups have taken responsibility and are now making improvements that it would have been difficult for the council to make. We've got other schemes. Blenavon Tennis Courts, I think about, was a great community-led scheme. The tennis courts in Cwmbran Park. All of these are case studies that we can build on to demonstrate what is possible, and we'll obviously, as we take decisions, keep capturing these examples and playing them back to the public. We need that tennis court approach, that Cwmbran Park approach, that Llantarnam approach, amplified all over the borough, because all of it would be possible. The role of the council has been an enabling role rather than a delivering role. So they are great examples, all of which would build trust in the approach.
Thank you for that. I'm conscious we've got a few members waiting for questions, so I'll go to Councillor Horler, because you had some difficulty before, and then I'll go to Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Chair. Fantastic presentation this afternoon. Thank you. My first question is, how is TBC going to explain the Marlborough Council for the community to fully understand, and the federation model for the deal? What time is it going to take for the communities to embrace the deal? Thirdly, I'm sure communities will ask what the deal is going to do to them, help them, and how is that going to be achieved and promoted?
Okay, if I go to perhaps Neil initially.
Okay, well, the deal is just the start of the journey. This is not a finished product. It's not intended to be. The first phase is all about developing the deal. This is only a deal when all our partners, our communities have had opportunity to feed into it and develop it. Otherwise, they'll never feel like it's a deal. They'll feel like it's a council initiative, a council project. It isn't. So we need the community to help us co-produce that and tell us how we can support them and what they want to deliver better outcomes. What was the second part of your question, sorry?
The first part of the question was about how is TBC going to explain the Marlborough principle within the communities for them to fully understand.
Apologies, we can't hear it home on the line.
The first part of the question was to ask TBC how they were going to explain the Marlborough principle to council for the communities to fully understand, and the federation model for the deal. So we're stepping back one page, and we're going to say that we are becoming a Marlborough Council, but the person in the street, to me, probably doesn't understand the theory of what's been said here, and how are we actually going to explain that, because that's the base of what we're doing for the deal, isn't it?
I think the leader is happy to respond as well on this.
Yeah, I think that the last point, I think, is an important one, really, because at the end of the day, people out there care about outcomes. They don't care about the processes that we go on to achieve those outcomes. And sometimes when you're consulting on something like this, that means it's difficult to get people to engage. That's why there is such a detailed sort of process of getting that engagement, getting that feedback in, so that we can really get people involved in the design phase of this, not just in the implementation phase. So I think that's key, because then we can sort of take them on a journey to show where we're trying to get to in terms of outcome, and to make it more relevant to them. Because just as an abstract of sort of talking about our county plan or our Marmot plans, that doesn't really mean things to people.
Yes, thank you for that. You okay with that, Councillor Horler? And I'll move on to Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this way of working, but there's a huge job to be done. Dealing with improving trust and satisfaction is just one point, but communication is the fundamental key to all this. We have to get that message over. So I've got a series of questions, but I'll give you three of them first of all. I'll cross my others off as others and ask them. So what steps are being taken to ensure communications are accessible and inclusive to all residents? The next one, how does the council decide on the most effective communication channels for different audiences? And the third one is part of the previous question is, how is feedback reported back to our local communities? You gave some excellent examples of case studies, but how do we report back to say this is happening, this you've achieved this? Thank you.
I think I'll go to Neil for that. With the comms.
Thanks, Councillor Seaborn. Well, we try and make our communications as accessible as we can in every instance. We use a broad range of channels, online and offline. Of course, a lot has become increasingly digital, but we also know that the cohort of our public who are digitally excluded gets less and less every year. COVID, perhaps if there was any small benefits from COVID, it drove a lot of people to using online digital channels because it was the only way to keep in touch. It was the only way to keep in touch with families and friends. So lots of people switched on to using digital channels. There is always a place for face-to-face, and we will, as part of our communication and engagement on the deal, undertake face-to-face activities. We are building a calendar of a huge range of opportunities where we can speak face-to-face to community groups, to forums, and we're going to be providing a slide deck to officers to go out to groups when they're engaging, whether that's with fellow politicians, whether it's with the business community, whether it's with community groups, the public, staff, that they'll have that ability to explain what the deal is by using that slide deck. Just on channels, we obviously try and use as many channels as we can. Some of the channels we use are ours, we call owned channels, and some of them not owned channels. So we're always sending press releases, trying to get our council news in the media, in the press. We're always using our social media channels to try and engage different audiences through their preferred social media. We know some people in our community will follow messages on Facebook. We know some people will follow Instagram. We'll know increasingly people will want to receive council information from TikTok. We will explore all opportunities for that. We also have our community newsletter going through every letterbox in the borough. So that means we know we're landing on people's doorsteps with some content that they can engage with. So we try and use a mixture of everything. And for feedback, our Get Involved platform is our public engagement platform, and it's where we'll be filtering all feedback on the deal. So whenever we go out to capture face-to-face feedback and insight, it'll be captured by the officer and given back to our engagement team to put into the deal, to put into the Get Involved platform. Our online activity will signpost everyone to get involved, and those provocations that I showed you will be the starting point. So as far as capturing what people want to improve in their communities, how they want to be involved in their communities, how they live their life in their communities, all of that will be captured in Get Involved. Then, through all the channels we outlined earlier, those positive case studies, those examples of people living and breathing the deal, taking on community empowerment, community power, and making decisions locally, again, will be used in all those channels to make sure we reach the widest possible audience in our community. Does that answer your question, Councillor Seaborn?
There's a couple of points. How do we get to the individual, the 86-year-old guy who's mobility challenged and doesn't go into these groups? And have we thought of using this text service that our schools use? Because when they want to message their parents or anybody, there is a text service that actually bands that message straight to their mobile phones, which is a valued way of letting people know about concerns or issues or events.
No, text is an increasingly popular channel of communication. WhatsApp is a very popular platform. We do now have a WhatsApp channel. It's under, I would say, development. We're not using it as extensively as we could. It's a difficult channel to share content on. It's very much about very brief messages. If you think about your own WhatsApp, They tend to be very short messages rather than sharing case studies or long examples. But we will look to utilise it and also, insert links that will go off to our website, because our website is still an important channel of our communication. So, very much exploring all channels, Councillor Seaborn, and those hard to reach, we will always have some difficulty, and we will always have some people who say we failed to reach them. But there is a broad range of channels now that enable people to engage with the council.
I think Stephen would like to come in briefly as well.
Yeah, just very briefly, Councillor. I think the first thing to remember, of course, is the reason that local authorities are the right people to lead on this initiative is because, and when I talk about local government being the frontline defence for the public sector, it is because we have a relationship with our community from cradle to grave, 365 days a year at all ages, whether it's children going to school, us collecting their refuse or whatever else it may well be. What we've tried to do throughout the time of our county plan, and this very much builds upon that, there is reference to Marmot even back when members agreed the county plan, is we have an open and transparent reporting mechanism through our council. That's really important to us. And we've really tried to work on that, so we don't mind at all putting our performance in front of members of the public and being held to account for it. It's also important to recognise we don't think that we know everything here, so engagement across partners and the wider sector really matters. And I'll just give you a couple of examples as to what I was doing last week. So last week, I met with the Commissioner for Older People for Wales, in part because to answer the question about how do we engage and what kind of offer do we have for the 84-year-old person that you've just mentioned, Councillor Seaborn. We've got a very strong relationship with the Future Generations Commissioner, who's really interested in working closely with us. National Resources Wales had the same conversation with them, Welsh Government, the WLJ, etc., all of whom have been engaged and are actually, I suppose, partners with us in one form or another on this journey. The final thing I'll just add is this, is that I attended Powys Council, been supporting them on their journey out of Estyn measures. They approached this council because we'd obviously been quite successful in the way that we'd approached Estyn, and I've been supporting them over in Powys. And ask them if they'd be our critical friend on this journey, because again, we do want to learn from others. We don't think we've got all of the answers here. Most importantly, we're listening, we'll be engaging, and we'll be taking the right approach to ensure that we can reach as many people as possible.
Thank you very much. You okay there, Councillor Seaborn?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for the answers.
Thank you. So I'll call on now Councillor Ashley and then Councillor Watkins.
I wanted to, when I was listening to the presentation, I totally agree with the Marmot principles and the county plan. That's something I think we all understand. I, for years, have banged on about the social contract, which I think is what the councils run on. What I was finding interesting, and poor Neil's got a thing to do with this, is getting this principle over to people. Obviously, officers, senior officers, sat down, done the research, because we've all been on the end of this, and we've had seminars, etc. Is how you say it and what you say it. So I'm going a little bit back to first principles on this. Obviously, the management team has got a good idea of what they're doing and presenting it, and today's scrutiny is about what we as members think. Now, what I hear, and I'm not being critical saying it, is we've got a bit of a word soup, because what do we really mean by some of the words that have been used? That's one question I have. I forever saying in scrutiny, could we have a glossary, because it might save some time. I get it with education, I get it with social services and housing, and with what we're doing here, and I think I said it the other day, it would be very useful to have some definitions. You use the word love, and there's other words in there. Now I'd like to have a bit of a definition on some of that, because it's like ad speak. Neil, you've got a difficult thing because you have to use this language. I might mean a very different thing as a councillor to a senior officer, to that 85-year-old guy down
down the road. And Rose, for instance, I'm looking at Rose at the moment grinning because she knows exactly what I'm talking about. Definitions of terms, and you've got a lot of them in there. The word deal itself is loaded. And obviously we're politicians as well, which makes it even worse. So every time I have to explain what the council does, I'm sure Chief Exec knows this as well. What does the council do? Everybody can form an opinion about this, and social media is loaded with it. That's the thing. Now, the important thing is to get a simple, clear message. That's the dream of everybody on the council, I suspect. But to get this into a concise form, I thought the county plan was a very good effort in that direction. Now, we've got a lot of things. If we look at it, we've got the 5, and I'm looking at this and thinking, how do we get this down to a lot more conciseness? Because that must be you guys' dream, to be quite frank. And you've got things going off all over the place. Now, I've done enough scrutiny over the years in places to think it'd be much easier asking those questions. And if I'm asking any questions at all, it's to critique, not to critical. You're not criticising what you're doing. I get the critique so you can get the simplification. But putting a solid, simple message over, you've got some of it going beautifully here. I mean, the social contract, I think most people understand. I don't want to criticise, don't want to patronise anybody. It's got to get it so it means something, because that's where we fail, I think, getting a message over so people understand it and own it, things like place planning. And I think you guys are doing a heck of a lot of work on this. I don't want to see it fail because people don't understand what we're doing. Can you get that over? I think it's the important thing. David, I'm finishing. I'm just trying to get this over because I think it's very important.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ashley. I think the focus was around terminology and language. So I'll give Stephen the opportunity to come back. And I know Councillor Seaborn also had a supplementary.
Yeah, I think the very simple answer, Councillor Ashley, is that we have to, of course, engage people as far as we're able to on their terms and speak to them in language that they understand. You are seeing the deal in its entirety. We would be having one conversation with our business sector, one conversation with our partners, one conversation with our community. So we, no doubt, and different parts of our community will also, it will mean different things to them too. We work in necessarily complex systems. As I said, we serve a whole community with about 850 services across the council. So people understand, I think, that the local authority operate in a complex world. But of course, we've got to engage with them on terms that they understand when we're talking about something that matters to them. And I suppose that's the only way that you can do this. What you've got in front of you today, of course, because you're scrutinising this as a collective, is all of that information. And I think if we'd have presented anything less to you, you probably would have been asking a slightly different question. So, but yeah, totally take on board everything that you've said there. Need to be careful with loaded phrases. I'm okay with people's words meaning something quite slightly different to different people. If people say, you know, how much do you love your borough? I think that will mean different things to different people. But generally speaking, I think we all get what it means really, and I'm pretty okay with that, to be honest. That's kind of how we've approached the delivery around our outcomes for our county plan. I suppose the one thing that people might ask, that is a distinction that I would most definitely ask people to understand. The county plan and the 9 wellbeing objectives are in place for a 5-year period. The wellbeing objectives are associated with that. The missions, which really factor in all areas of practice across all ages and all parts of our communities in the broadest sense of the word, are the mechanism by which we deliver against our Marmot objectives. Our Marmot objectives will not be delivered in a 5-year political cycle or a 1-year budgetary cycle. It's impossible to change that Marmot landscape in such a short period of time. This is the delivery mechanism for our master plan, I suppose, as a borough, which takes us much further into the future. And Marmot is the right framework for a council to look at because it thinks about communities in its broadest sense all of the support that they need to tackle those inequalities, and there's no better framework around for it. And that's, I suppose, this is the vehicle for delivering that, and I think that has to be understood because, of course, you know, we've got a shorter period, a shorter contract, I suppose, with our current county plan. This is certainly looking much further into the future.
Thank you for that.
Can I come back very briefly, please, David?
Yes, if you'd like to be brief, thank you.
Yeah, I was. Thank you, Chief Executive. That clarity in that is good. I like the fact you've come to different audiences, but I recognise the fact that what you said is the truth. That obviously the complexity, but I still feel that to some extent, I think I said the other day that we as councillors need to understand and own this as part of our political process. I mean, overall political process, because we're selling this idea. I said that the other day, didn't I?
Thanks for that, Councillor Ashley. I think let's keep that in mind when we come to recommendations.
Thank you, David.
I'll pass on to Councillor Seaborn. You wanted to come back with something briefly, I think.
I'll come back after Jane has got her hand up.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yes, Jane, I was going to bring in next, and then I've got Councillor Yall in the chamber also waiting. So Jane, and then Nathan, and then Rose again. Okay, Jane.
Okay. Yeah, actually, one of my questions sort of followed on from Rose's, so I hope I'm not jumping again here. But you said that the responses are going to, the feedback is going to go back in Get Involved Torfaen. Is that online only? Because if it is, that still excludes quite a number of the population, you know, to get the feedback. Anyway, I've got quite a few questions, but I'll just pick a few for now. So on page 17, it talks about the costs being met for the strategy and approach from different grant fundings from the Welsh Government and the HDRC. Are we confident that that's going to be enough funding to cover this? And also, it mentions there about the Powys County Council being our critical friend. So what sort of involvement are we expecting from Powys? What is going to be their role in all this? And the other thing that I wanted to know is, I think case studies are brilliant. I think they're really good at explaining to people, you know, practical situations that they can understand. But is there a concern that it's going to take a while for those case studies to happen, for us to then be able to put them together and get them out in the community? So we've sort of got a vicious circle going there. I'll leave to that for the moment. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think that's probably Stephen or Neil.
I think the first one, Councillor Watkins, did you ask the first element of that question was regarding? Sorry, could you repeat that? No, I think there was a second. The first part, Councillor Watkins.
The first one was about the Get Involved. The feedback was going to go on to Get Involved, and I wasn't sure. I thought that was online only.
The platform is online, but the actual capturing of information will be captured physically out in groups, but will be put back into the Get Online system so that we can run reports. So it can be captured face-to-face. The questions are a set of questions that can be captured on a piece of paper with a forum or with a group face-to-face. So
Sorry, I was talking about the feedback. I thought you said the feedback. I thought Councillor Seaborn had asked a question about how, once we'd gathered all this information and then we have case studies and it's starting to work, how are we going to feed back that information? And I thought you said it would be through Get Involved. And if Get Involved is online only, that excludes a lot of people from then seeing that feedback.
Sorry, the feedback will be captured and be shared in all our channels. So those will be some of the digital channels we have and some of the non-digital. So when we have something to report back, we can use Torfaen Talks. We can send out press releases, which will then be picked up by the media. We can use a variety of channels that will then capture or speak to people online and offline.
Okay, thank you.
Stephen, I think.
I'll pick up the question around the role of Powys and the critical friend. I mean, the critical friend, we've spoken to Powys in some detail about this. I spent an afternoon with them a couple of weeks ago. We want them to support and challenge us in equal measures. We think that matters. We're not asking them to be our cheerleader. in any way, but neither do we want them to be just a cynic. But it's important that we know where our blind spots are, and they'll be a part of that. We want them, therefore, to bring constructive challenge. We'll be testing certain assumptions with them. They'll be asking us some uncomfortable questions, no doubt, pointing about the risks and consequences, unintended consequences. We want that external perspective. I think that's important. They don't share our understanding of our local context necessarily, but of course they are another local authority, so they do understand the challenges that they're having in the broader national context, which I think is invaluable in helping us to understand if we're heading in the right direction. There'll definitely be a focus on improvement from them. That's really important. I think ultimately what we're trying to ensure that we do is avoid that groupthink. We want better decision making as we go through this. We want obviously credibility and trust from another local authority can be achieved here. So, and really just to help us to continue to focus on continuous improvement. That's the role of a critical friend more broadly. They're the conversations that we've had with Powys, which they've agreed to do with us.
Okay, you content, Councillor Watkins, or you had a further element to be?
I'm content with those two answers. I did ask two other questions. The one around the costs, for grant funding for the costs, and one around the time it might take to gather case studies, you know, to then obviously use those to promote our ideas.
Yep, thank you for that. I thought there was more, and David Leach is happy to come back on that.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll cover off the costs and then hand over to Neil around the case studies question. The cost, again, really important one. So our HDRC funding is a 5-year programme of funding. But what that programme of funding is designed to do is to build the research culture within our officer base. So it's not just an external resource there to go and do the research itself. That's what it will be doing in the short term. But alongside that, it's to build up that expertise internally within officers to do that research. And if I give you an example, we've already had 2 officers now bring quite thorough research papers through as part of their day-to-day work already. So that research culture is starting to be embedded, and I'm confident over the 5-year period that we'll get there. Where there's specific funding resources for research required, what the HDRC and in future officers would be doing is applying to research councils for that funding. So we've already got applications in with research councils to do very targeted and specific pieces of work. And in terms of that broader grant funding, the way that I look at this is that this is all part of that bigger picture that we have around strengthening independence, resilience, and the way that we support communities through our preventative approach. So we've got to look in worlds like the one that I'm the director of, and Jason's and in others, at ways that we can transfer some of the resource that we currently spend on acute services over time into that preventative space, and that means into that community space, into that deal. That's hard, but what the grant funding currently allows us to do is it allows us the time to make that transition. And we've started to see some of that in adults. We're starting to see it now in children's, where some of those core costs are coming down to enable us to do that additional investment out into community. So grant funding is important, but we're trying to design a model that in the medium term won't be as reliant on grant funding to support community activity.
I think, Councillor Watkins, your final question was about, did you say the time it takes to develop case studies?
Yes, because I think, I did say, you know, I think case studies are really good. And often in scrutiny, we ask for case studies because it just gives you real life examples about things and helps you understand things. But there's going to be a time lag, isn't there, between things being achieved, therefore they become a case study that you can then show to the community to try and get them to achieve things.
Yeah, we're always trying to capture the stories of the council's work, and increasingly we'll capture the stories of the community's work. Frequently, the best way for us to do that is in short film formats on platforms like TikTok or Instagram. And if we can do that, if we can tell a story in 30 seconds, we've got a much better chance of people engaging with it, which is quite difficult, and a 30-second film doesn't take 30 seconds to make. But our team are constantly looking for those examples. We've got some great examples. I mentioned some of them earlier of already brilliant community initiatives. communities that have come to the table with an idea and seen it through to fruition. Now, frequently our job is to tell that story throughout that process. The idea coming forward, the project starting, the project completing. In an ideal world, we'll get to the point where communities will tell their own stories about what they're achieving and what they're delivering, because I'm sure they'll want to tell and be the spokespeople themselves and share their news themselves. Already, communities have access to some great channels and use them really well. So if we can get a combination of our team telling stories, but also communities increasingly telling their own story, that would really amplify what the deal means.
All right, Councillor Watkins, I think that was helpful.
Yes, thank you.
Before I go to Councillor Ewell, I just checked. I think you had your hand up, Councillor Seaborn. Was there something you wanted to quickly check back on?
No, Chair, I'll wait for my questions to come up.
Okay.
I'll wait for my turn.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Yole and then Councillor Collette-Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of points actually, so I'll try to make sure that I'm actually saying what's a question and what's a point. But I guess the first point says this is really encouraging. It's really good stuff to see that you're thinking about this, because actually looking at the variety, and there's an awful lot of work has obviously gone on, there are some conflicting issues that you have to thrash about in going for these approaches, because there are a number of different approaches we will be trying to pilot and do differently, which are not necessarily in conflict with each other, but we need to be aware of the fact that some of them will be butting up against each other. And I think I'll come back to this. The logical conclusion of this approach, if indeed we sustain it, and the political leadership of this council remains behind this for the next 5 to 10 years, will present challenges for the members of this scrutiny committee and across the council, because actually we are fundamentally giving power away and trying to work in partnership with other organisations, residents and communities, and we have to work out where our place sits in that. So I think the first thing I've got, though, just coming back to it, the Wigan deal is a fantastic place to start. Just looking at all the information you have on this deck, I'm very conscious that the Wigan deal is something that the genesis was about 20 years ago and is something that's been going on for 15 years. As we are going out to both residents and other partners, I mean, I'd like some clarity about how we are ensuring that we're not setting ourselves up to fail, looking at the level of detail we're expressing here, and it's actually how we are going to take this at a clip, but actually at a clip that is sustainable to take those partners with us. Because I think the reality of that is the deal bit of what you talked us through is all about the nature of the relationships that we want to pursue and to promote across the borough. And actually, coming back to your point, Steve, earlier on, I think we also have to be alive to the fact that the geographies of Blythe Gwent and Torfaen are too small to necessarily be looking at each other in isolation, and it makes sense to be looking at the northern bit of Gwent together, so I fully endorse that. The second is about missions, because actually mission approaches are different to what you're setting out in a deal. So if the concept of a deal is how we conduct ourselves differently to bring people together, the mission becomes the forcing mechanism for agreeing to what we want to do differently and to bring people on board. I think they're fine as they are. My challenge to you would be, as they are currently outlined, they're a bit too broad and baggy. The whole point of achieving missions, which again, you need to try to achieve missions that are owned by the community and owned by as many bits of, as many sectors as possible. So that is the challenge, actually, how to hone those down over the next couple of months. But it's actually trying to work out something that can be both audacious but crucially achievable. So looking at Camden has done a lot of work on this. They had one of their missions is to ensure that I think every kid in school gets a certain level of nutrition by 2030. If we are thinking about some of the long-term sort of social and health needs of kids across northern Gwent, might it make more sense to see if you could actually say there are specific targets about nutrition and childhood obesity that we want to be looking at over the next period, because it's all about galvanising action to achieve something that you can work out actually works. And actually, as a point to that, there's a lot of work being piloted by central government, and indeed Nick Thomas-Symonds now has a role on this after the reshuffle in Westminster, about the test, learn and grow approach, which is actually an attempt to bring together various stakeholders to really kick the tyres and iterate ways in which very small scale initiatives are planned, are delivered, are evaluated and then grown. The third point This is most importantly, we concentrated, understandably, on the role of the council and the community in this process. Like I said, it's a forcing mechanism for bringing other sectors together. And obviously the Wigan deal itself was initially established as a way of bringing the social sector and the public sector bodies across the borough of Wigan together. But crucially, as we all continue to live in straitened times, I think what thinking have you done about how you can fundamentally bring in the private sector here? Because essentially they will have to be key delivery partners, especially when it comes down to some of the aspirations on growth. The fourth point, and this speaks a bit actually what Councillor Haller and also Councillor Seaborn were talking about. So I'm glad you recognise it as well. A lot of the stuff in this deck we wouldn't want to go anywhere near any normal people. They don't need to know what Marmot is. We don't need to be talking about those principles. It's actually how we internalise, and it's something we work to. But what I would say, and this is more of a challenge, is we don't want to get too determinative too quickly and too early on in how this approach is adopted. And specifically, again, going back to Councillor Watkins's questions, one of the beauties of this, if you can make it work, is actually engagement has to happen at a time and in a place that is relevant for the people and the communities that we're trying to work with. So we actually have to take a step back and work out actually what can come through organically as much as possible for as many of our communities. And the fifth one, which is the actual question, and this comes back to my point, if this is successful and if this is something that is pursued after the next set of local elections in Torvine, what thinking are you doing at this very early stage about what governance of these types of arrangements will be? Because at the end of the day, the council will have to play a much different role. It is convening all those sectors and those people and enabling those challenges. We've talked about how we enable, but the reality of the role of the council and of this scrutiny committee to scrutiny the ins and outs of everything will have to be fundamentally different, because we will be convening people and ushering people in the right direction, not determining what needs to happen. So early thoughts on governance, and especially as Stuart, Councillor Ashley and Councillor Williams have both mentioned, that we have a plethora of plans, and indeed we're halfway through what should be a county borough plan, not a county plan. I've been holding that in for 3 years. I don't understand why we are pretending to be some large rural unit when we're not. But actually, how are they all going to knit together with the governance within the authority and others taking it forward?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Young. I think a lot of content there, so I think perhaps I'll move to Stephen to initiate the response.
Yeah, and there's a lot there, Councillor, but it's really, really helpful. Just on the early thoughts on governance, I think you're absolutely correct. We've got to start looking at that very early in this process, and we've got to support establish that governance processes and put all of those things in place. And I think, again, recommendations from this group will be most useful, as it would be across both of the authorities that we're working with. I think the issue, I suppose, with focusing in, let's just focus on one point that you made there, which was, say, for example, if we focus around one aspect of inequality across our community. We don't need to do that, because we've got our outcomes and our priorities are set with Marmot, and it's important that that proportionate universalism is applied. The system we've got today, to some degree, focuses around a particular issue and invests in it, but you can't tackle inequalities across a community. This is the principle of Marmot, is you can't tackle inequalities across a community by focusing on one of the challenges that a community might face. I'll give a simple example that we always use in our presentations, is that we know that we've got a housing crisis across the borough and across Wales and across the UK more broadly. So it's important that we build houses, but it's alongside those houses, we also need the right economy, the right infrastructure, the right environment for people to live and thrive in. Because otherwise what we've got is more roofs over the heads of more and more poorly people. That can't be the solution that we've got. So, and the second point about Marmot, and this is why it's such an important thing for us to understand, is it really does start to tackle these problems, if necessary, street by street, neighbourhood by neighbourhood, community by community, as opposed to thinking that we just set a national ambition, which are always the right things to be looking at, because they're looking at those big, those large challenges that we've got across our communities. But they always fail, I think, to connect into the communities that they're trying to reach, and this is the vehicle for which that can happen. So I think that's really important. You did mention, just one other thing I will mention here as well, in terms of the breadth of the missions, but I think to some degree this covers your point on engagement with the private sector, for example. You're absolutely right, the missions are set out at a very high level, deliberately so, because in this presentation they're just to show you that we've thought about population and place, our people and place, in the broadest context. You'll notice that they focus on 0 to 5-year-olds, then they start talking about aspirations across all ages, and then it talks about community engagement and leadership, which of course again touches on all people, economy and place development, and then finally in the way that we work in those shared service areas that we provide for our communities. So we've tried to cover all aspects alongside that. But importantly, in the background here, there are already, alongside those missions, we have objectives being developed under each of those missions, and we'll have plans that align to our county plan, our annual delivery plan as a council that sits. So just as an example here, early years building bright futures, as the objectives around that are starting to talk about cross-council delivery models for early years support, based on those universal targeted and specialist provision. We need to improve our data-driven practices to identify at-place strengths, etc., etc. So there is a really detailed plan that is being developed, objectives that are being developed that sit behind each of these missions. We won't just work to the headline within the mission, I suppose is what I would say.
Okay, I think the leader would like to add a few words.
Yeah, there's lots of very useful challenges in there. The first of which was about that balance between pace and sustainability. When talking about these things, how do you affect change with enough pace for it to be impactful, but not for it to be like a flash in the pan that just wings away in the longer or medium term? I think that's a challenge as we set our ambitions and as we work to them. Secondly, on those missions, I guess with any mission or any plan, the temptation is to make it broader, whereas do you need to focus down more specifically on very actionable specific things? And the Camden example, I think, is a good one. I think that's where we can learn from other councils as we refine and get there. The test and grow approach, I think, is a really good one, because what national governments seem to do, in my experience, is they do either one or the other. They either go in at the very local level, run a pilot scheme, and then don't properly evaluate and scale it up, or they try and go in at a big bang national level, and it's not always very effective. So I think the test and grow approach and attempt to kind of bridge the gap between there, and not just drop down individual pilot projects and then never properly learn from them, but instead have that test and grow approach. I think that's a really interesting thing for us to get involved in. And lastly, about engagement. That's the challenge with engagement, isn't it? We will get a lot of engagement if we come up with a plan people don't like. Like if we ever, thinking of the distant past, went to close a school, for example, you get a lot of engagement. People are very engaged in that decision because they see the impact of it. When you go out to engage on things, when you haven't decided what you're going to do, and it's more around principles and strategies, people don't engage so much because they don't see necessarily the direct impact on their lives. How do we bridge that so that we don't do post-engagement, where we've already decided what we want to do and we're just going out to people to give us a nod or not, because that's not optimal. How do we get that level of engagement in? I think it's why we've tried to put a bit of time aside there, and there are lots of different means by which people can engage with us. We're not just relying on one format, one way of engaging, because I think that's important.
Thank you for that. Are you content, Councillor Yeo? Okay, I see Neil wants to come on.
I've got a point, but I'll come.
I'm just noting, just to remind officers, we do have numbers still wishing to speak, so thank you.
Just touching on your reference to Wigan, we explained we had an online meeting with the Assistant Chief Executive from Wigan. He made the point that Wigan deal started from a place of tackling austerity, and it was all about cutting services, cutting the budget. They're now going into their second phase of the deal, which is now called Progress with Unity. Yeah, we've raised an eyebrow. And actually now their focus is on tackling health inequalities. So that was really interesting that their new deal is very much where our emerging deal is, about tackling health inequalities that exist in the borough. So that was quite interesting. On your point about the private sector, Stephen did a presentation to our future Blaenau Gwent and Torfaen group, which is around 200 managerial level colleagues across the two organisations. And our economic development business colleagues went away and started to frame what they felt the deal could be with businesses, and it just, obviously this will be through further engagement, but they started to make their proposals, what we would do around supporting businesses in the county to deliver economic growth, helping residents into skilled, prosperous and secure employment, encouraging growth in the number of small and medium-sized enterprises. They've really started to take that mindset that we're asking people to take on board and think about how they deliver their services, and starting to put it through a deal, sort of framing it in a deal, which I thought was really encouraging, that they've gone away and independently thought about what it is they can do to make a deal with the business community. So I thought that was quite interesting. You may wish to know.
Thank you for that. So, Councillor Yell.
Yeah, it's just really, just picking up the leader's point again, on the Test and Grow. I think there are currently six buckets of initiatives that are being done. They would be evaluated going into next year. I think if someone's already done it, you can tell them to stop being a smart aleck. But actually, if you haven't done it, it might be worth going back and cross-referencing what those 6 areas are against the 5 missions we've had, and just to go back and have a conversation with the people in those places. Because the point I'm making is not to undermine Marmot, this, that, and the other plans, but it's actually, if this is to be successful, we want it to be achievable in the short term to prove that it is maintainable, is that bad English? We can maintain it in the long term. So the whole point about choosing something that is smaller and tangible within those missions, it's something that can both galvanise and energise the stakeholders and community, however you choose to define them, but also to have something you can actually point to in a shorter period of time that this is an approach that works. Then you learn from that, you scale it up, you try to work out how it works elsewhere.
Okay, I think Andrew would like to come in as well.
Sorry about that. Thanks for that. I was going to come in on the governance point, because what we're talking about here is a change in how we spend our money. And we've been doing that incrementally for a number of years. We've heard good examples from Dave and Jason and Neil about where we're spending that money differently. We're doing intervention work to avoid getting into the acute problem. And we're also getting much more used to spending money via grants to community groups. We need to think about how we manage that governance, because that is going to increase as part of this process. And it's how we manage that, but how you as a committee also scrutinise that, because I think we need to think about that. So if that's a recommendation that comes out of this meeting to review that governance model, I think that will be very helpful.
Thank you for that. And in fact, I've made a note about community governance and learning from perhaps some patterns of the past. So thank you for that. Conscious we've got a couple more members coming in, but I just want to make one very quick observation, if I may, using Chair's prerogative. Because, again, as with others, I look back at the Wigan example, and obviously, as it's been alluded to, it started in austerity. So I think we just need to be quite careful, if we're referencing that we don't actually give a wrong message about this being a response to austerity. This is actually very much a change. It's just a point of note. I'll bring in, it's Councillor Thomas and then Councillor O'Seaborn.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask, how are we going to set up this Citizens' Assembly? We say that it's going to happen on January 2026. I just wonder, what is the mechanism for that? And how can we be assured that all areas of Torfaen and all ages of Torfaen will be represented?
Okay, I think Stephen and Neil. Neil first.
Thanks, Councillor Thomas. We've had a conversation with local partnerships who are supporting us with a few pieces of work about setting up a citizens' assembly. The proposal we have at the moment is that there are 40 representatives on each assembly in Blaen and Gwent and an assembly in Torfaen. A company, I hope I got their name right, Sortition, are engaged to find those people, and they ensure that they're a broad cross-section of our population, and that group are found independently. So we don't source the assembly, they're gathered independently by Sortition, and that piece of work then, those people are paid to contribute for their hours. So it's, it's real good in-depth research, and we can test how our deal is shaping up and forming with them early in the new year is the hope.
Okay, I hope that's helpful, Councillor Thomas. Did you want to ask?
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Right, so if I move on to Councillor Seaborn and then Councillor Matthews.
Hey, David, I've got my hand up number 1.
Sorry.
Look on you.
My apologies. As I said, my vision is not at its best. So if you'd like to go ahead, Councillor Ashley.
Yeah, I was going back to what Nathan was talking about, which was partnership with the community and voluntary sector and possibly businesses. I just think we're sorry about just take my referencing back again. Going back to partnership with the voluntary sector and the community, it does seem to be a large part of the council acting as a catalyst, and I would applaud that, because certain senior officers have been very, very good at it, and it needs to be a part of this. The thing that worries me about it is short-term, and it's always been a problem, is short-term funding. That's one aspect of it. And for our officers as well, because it does seem we're getting a lot of bang for the bucks out of this. And if we're doing things like place planning, working with the voluntary sector as a delivery for our services, it needs to be essential that we don't lose experienced officers and don't lose that, because that goes back a long way. We had communities first and all sorts of things where in the past we've lost grant. Now it's important. I've experienced that in my working life. The other aspect that I made a note of was working with private businesses and social enterprises. We don't do a lot of social enterprises in this borough. That's maybe something we need to look at. There's a lot of co-op money and stuff which we could usefully use to plug some gaps that we've got. I wonder whether the Chief Executive, Dave Leach, etc., have looked at that, because that's something I don't see, but it certainly is a way forward. I'm well aware of that, and wondering whether you guys have looked at that. So I'm not going to say any more on that, but I do think that's
okay.
Cherishing our partners is an important part of what we're doing.
Yeah, I think it's a fairly important point. I would just point out where our scrutiny task is, which was around the communication strategy. But I think that point on partnership, Stephen would like to come back on.
I'll let David come back on some of that, but I just to cover off the points about grant loss and the risk and the impact upon officers. This is a different way of really trying to reduce demand upon council services at the heavy end of our business. In social care, let's be frank about it, if we could avoid crisis or long-term support of people in social care and housing because they don't need that type of support any longer, because they are healthier and and equality is being addressed more effectively across the borough, effectively we'll spend all the money that we get as councils, as we do all the time. We'll continue to try to raise awareness as to the impact that loss of grant has upon us. But this is about spending the money that we do get more effectively. There's no greater way to spend that money less effectively than to do nothing, I think, because ultimately the demand continues to grow, the pressures continue to grow, and we'll continue to spend this, as all councils are at the moment, on increasing demand at the sharp end of our business. So we want to make sure that people at that end of the business continue to get fantastic support from us, There's no impact upon people who are eligible for those services, but we shouldn't shy away from the fact we just want fewer of them to need those services. Then we can spend the money in places that matter to everybody across the community in a more effective way. I don't know if Dave wants to pick up the wider community stuff.
Just to pick up very briefly that point around social enterprises, I think it's a critical one. We've got to see social enterprises, though, as one of the tools that we have, just like community groups, just like clubs, just like shops, just like faith groups, just like sports clubs, one of those tools that can deliver this community's approach and practice. Where social enterprises work is when we as a council and other funders shift more towards a commissioning model of the third sector rather than just a grant-giving structure. So there's work underway within our commissioning teams at the minute to look at exactly how we do that. So how do we start to commission activity from that sector, which gives more certainty that allows a social enterprise model to develop around it, rather than looking at a grant model. So it's a long way of saying, yes, we are looking at it. We've got more work to do to shift that approach towards commissioning rather than grant for those parts of the sector. But it's certainly something that's on the agenda.
David, I just want to briefly come back to say that in a communication strategy, we should be communicating that very thing, because both officers have put that over very strongly.
Yeah, I think there's a fair point there, actually, about the how can you help us, what can you do type of questions that Neil framed a little earlier. So thank you for that, Councillor Ashley. If I move on to Councillor Seaborn and then Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got final 3 questions. And my first one is, should all scrutinies include this work in their work programme, or will this committee be the conduit for this job or this type of work? Question 1. Question 2, what indicators are used to measure success? So when we've achieved it, how will we know? And the third and final question is, can you explain what is expected of the comment key roles for elected members established? How can we get the message out? Thanks.
Thank you for that. So I'll go to, who's going to volunteer for this one? Stephen, thank you.
So I think the decision, I can imagine that this scrutiny group would certainly want to have oversight of the programme overall, but I'd see no problem theoretically with different scrutinies looking at different missions either. I suppose that's something that I'd encourage scrutiny chairs to discuss. One thing I would just bear in mind, of course, is that the missions are not directorate linked. So Mission 3 around communities, for example, will have connections to all 5 missions, partly because it covers all ages, but also because within the voluntary sector or the community sector, for example, when we're working and sharing power alongside our residents, there'll be a need for us to grow those communities. So it's not an easy one to answer, but I think the overall programme should sit with the wider this group. The measurement of success is a complex one, Councillor, and it may be something that you want to look at separately as this group too, in part because the measurements of success will come at a micro, I suppose a meso and a macro level, I suppose. The stories do matter because they are measures of success in of themselves. It's important to recognise, though we do have a performance and assessment framework that we will measure the objectives of each mission individually against and each plan within the mission, within those missions, but also a cross-cutting piece across all of the 5 missions collectively. And we're doing a piece of work there with the HDRC, the Health Determinants Research Collaboration, in terms of ensuring that what that looks like. But we can certainly, you probably do need a whole session on that really to look at the way that we're approaching that. And what was the question on key roles, Councillor? Just remind me of that one. Members' key roles, was it?
I think the document. Sorry.
I think that one, Councillor Seaborn, is effectively, I think, is to make sure that members are as best supported as they can possibly be. We have a programme of investing in our people, which sits behind this because we know that our staff will need support with this, but we recognise also that members who it's really important for us are leading this piece of work. We also know, and members are telling us that they want to do that, but we recognise, just like we do, just like our staff does, we recognise that we'll need to be supportive of each other, and members may well need support in understanding what that role looks like and the best way that they can deliver it. So it's really just a commitment to supporting members as we take the deal forward.
Okay, is that helpful, Councillor Seaborn?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Neil, can you make it brief?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Seaborn. And I'd like to say we'll provide members with a slide deck that you'll be able to use and refer to. So any groups you speak to, any groups you're part of, you'd be welcome to share information and talk around the deal, and also your own communications channels. So when the public communication engagement activity opens up, please share links to the deal that people can get involved, and perhaps use those provocations about what people would like to improve in their communities, how they can help in those communities to start those conversations. So utilising your own channels. Sorry, just on the previous question, Stephen mentioned work with HDRC, sorry. We've started to pull out some things we can measure. We have already things like the resident survey that gives us some benchmarking data, but starting to measure community satisfaction, community trust, staff satisfaction, staff trust, our own increased efficiency. Stephen referenced the better outcomes for residents linked to the missions. It could be reduced demand on statutory services. It could be financial savings to reinvest in communities. It could be the number of co-produced services or community designed and delivered services. So there is a raft of things that we will be able to follow and track that will give us feedback, give us the intelligence on whether the deal is working.
Thank you for that. Great. So I move on to Councillor Watkins.
Thank you. Yeah, hopefully this is quite a short question. Looking at the questions or provocations that have been put together for the listening project, I just wondered, is question 3 about how could it be better and question 5 about how you could improve it, is that not just two ways of asking the same question? Or is there more to it? Or is that the point, that it's just two ways of coming at the same question?
I think Neil on that one.
Yeah, they're just the sort of framing of the questions, and actually we did have a colleague feedback exactly the same point. Was it almost the same question? If it elicited a slightly different response, it could be useful, but if it just got the same response, it probably isn't useful. The feedback we had was obviously less questions are probably better. We probably got better opportunity to really engage people if we refine them. And again, all your feedback on those provocations is part of the purpose of today's session.
Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think Councillor Bonera, you had a hand up earlier. You wish to come in?
You're on mute, Catherine.
Apologies.
Thank you. Page 36, Organisational Design and Delivery Methods. I'm a bit intrigued as to the AI project initiated that will improve residents' outcome. I'm just wondering what that is and how it will improve the outcome. Are we talking data gathering such as CRM analytics or AI sentiment scoring? Because I can understand that being of benefit. Is that what we're talking about with that?
I think Neil and Stephen.
Yeah. Ultimately, Councillor, we've got two areas here, I suppose, to focus on. Digital technology and data are one. AI is another, I suppose, is the way that we break that down. It's important that we are building our evidence base so that we can really respond to that is going on locally. We'll use that through a variety of mechanisms, and we'll use AI in order to help us to do some analysis around that. There's no doubt about it. But we are a digital-first council, and that means that we'll look, and of course we are committed, including within this, to be driving cost efficiencies across our council best as we can. And there is no doubt about it that some of our services, both in terms of the way that they operate and indeed some of the ways that we are engaging with our public, would be improved as a result of investment in AI. So we're looking at all of those options operationally so that we can deliver against the council's ambition set out within the county plan, within the aspirations around the deal, and also, of course, with regards to some of our specific policies, such as the digital first policy and strategy. Does that answer that, Councillor Benera?
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, thank you, Steve. Just quick, I like the phrase, by the way, it's not a project, it's a movement, it's a mindset. I think that's really good. And I just wanted to come in on what Councillor Seaborn said, that case studies for stakeholders. It's really important, I think, that members are fed and in the loop on what good looks like. So if that could be fed back to members maybe before it's gone out to the public, I think that would be really helpful.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful, and I think I've seen nods in the chamber here, Councillor Benera, so I think that's taken on board. So there are no further questions. Last chance. I'd like to thank you, members, for your questions and the officers for your in-depth responses. Would the leader or any officers like to make any concluding comments before we invite you to leave? And then that gives members the opportunity to make recommendations. So, Stephen.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, members, for a thoroughly engaging scrutiny session. We'll take a lot from this, all of the comments that have been made. We'll make sure that we're responding to anything, whether it be directly or actually in terms of the development of the deal. So I really do thank you, because I think it's been one of the best scrutiny sessions I've been part of, actually. Thank you for that.
Okay, well, we'll invite you to take your leave, and perhaps I could ask Neil that the updated slide deck is made available to members as well. Thank you. If I can remind members that we are still in formal proceedings and are still being webcast. Okay, so members, if I can remind you, what's been asked of the Scrutiny Committee today is to consider, when we're coming up with our recommendations, we're asked to review the report, the attached slide deck, detailing the proposed communications and engagement strategy and approach for development and launch of the deal between the Council and the community, and making suggestions for improvement. I think quite a number of points have been made. Would anyone like to start off, or shall I perhaps put a couple of observations forward to start? Okay, I'll start with just a couple of points. I picked up that there was a suggestion that we really need to have a good focus on schools and early years to engage with the deal. Does that seem a fair point from comments that were made? Yep. I also picked up a point about taking great care to make sure we have a language appropriate to the audience, and that we actually have terminology appropriate to the audiences. For example, presenting to business, presenting to schools, presenting to community groups. Does that strike a chord? Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, sorry, Chair, can I just add to that? I think we need, obviously, what you said, clear evidence of how public feedback, but how it influences the decision making as well. That needs to go back.
Yes, I think that's a fair point. I think in terms of clear language in communicating back and closing the feedback. So I think we'll pick that up as well. Very helpful.
Sorry, Chair, can I just add on to the point that you made with the language for the different things? I think with the communities, there still might need to be different language there because different community groups will use or understand different sorts of language, so it might need to be broken down slightly differently again.
Could we have it in plain English, please? Because I did think there was a bit of word souping going on there.
Yes, I think that was a fair point, and I think you also made a point about a glossary of terms, but I think if you've got language right, you don't tend to need a glossary, but
it might need it for us.
Yeah. Thank you for that. There was also a point I felt about if there is a calendar of events to go out, then that needs to be shared with members at a very early stage so that we can be aware of what's happening in our communities and be ready to take part. Nothing about us without us, as it were. Is that a fair point?
No surprises.
Yep. And then I also picked up something from questions about actually perhaps testing the wording of the missions to actually see if it is the right wording to get community buy-in.
Certainly.
Just a suggestion, which I think came from a couple of the questions. And linked to that, there was also about, which I picked up towards the end, it was Councillor Watkins' point, actually perhaps testing some of those questions with maybe members to check that they do seem to have appropriate resonance or they are repetitive.
Very good point there.
So those are the things I've picked up from the plethora of very helpful comments that came. So I can't quite see the hands, but, Councillor Seaborn.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think there was one about Nathan's point about reviewing the governance.
Yeah.
I think that was, and the other one of measuring success.
Yes.
How we measure success.
Yes, and if I could, I said, I've made a note here, community governance, because we actually need to look at how we broaden the governance to include more of the community. So it's not purely the council. After all, in Governance and Audit Committee, we have non-councillors involved, and there are other forums that we have. So they're not without precedent. So I think those are some considerations. Helpful points. Thank you.
Yeah, I think with the point that Andrew made when he came in about the finance and actually, you know, that point that we need to pick up on.
Yep, we're making notes. Councillor Ashley, yes, it is you next.
I know you admonished me slightly for this. Following on from that, it was making sure that we had officers and that whole partnership thing going in place with community councils, etc., etc. They did buy into that, I thought.
Yes, and I think that's also a fair point, expanding that to make sure that there is that content going out to the community councils if they are.
And going on the back of your governance thing, we also got some community monitoring of what the council does. I was thinking of saying that. I will say it now in the appraisal of what's done by the council on behalf of community groups would be quite valuable. I'm allowed to say that, even though we didn't discuss it, I think.
Well, I think the reality is that if things are not going as they seem, I think the example of the closing school was given, then you do hear about it very quickly. I know Councillor Janet Jones wanted to come in.
Yes, just reiterating the communications to the various age groups, especially like the over 50s forums, the senior citizens groups in our town, in the borough. I think it's important that we get out, if it's got to be word of mouth, to those. So an early possession of, you know, the slides to enable us to go out to these groups would be really, really much appreciated.
Yes, thank you for that. And I think clarity on the role for members in the communications process and the tools that are given to them, if I can summarise that.
I did raise the political process, which is a bit about members. If anybody's going to get in the neck, it's normally us.
Yes, point noted. I think one final point I picked up on was actually tackling or tracking the costs and the use of grants in order for change to be sustainable and embedded.
Good point.
So if you're any other hands, I can't see. Oh, sorry, Nick, Councillor Hawler.
This might not be appropriate, but we'll try. Long-term longevity of the deal, political change and everything else, how do you protect that? What measures can be put into place to protect the deal long-term?
Good point, actually.
Yeah, I think that's a question. I think we've highlighted the fact that this needs to be something that's embedded in the long term. At one point, I did wonder whether Neil was going to refer to the art of the deal, but he led to the art of the possible instead, which was helpful. I'll pass to Bex just to check if we can summarise the points that we've got on Neil. Not Neil. Geraint.
Geraint.
Bex.
Yeah, so we've got focus on schools and early years to engage with the deal. Need to take great care regarding language and terminology to make sure it's appropriate to each audience, and how it influences the decision making and feedback. There were a couple of extra points then tagged on about some different community groups themselves with different languages, and later on about Councillor Jack Jones just brought about different ages. Where that take me to now? Calendar events needs to be shared with members at an early stage. Testing the wording of the missions in order to get community buy-in. Need to test some of the questions. It was brought up by Councillor Watkins in the meeting, see if they're appropriate or repetitive. Need to review the community governance and the governance around the grants. Officers and part of the point raised by Councillor Ashley about the community councils and making sure they're involved in community monitoring. Role of members and the tools available regarding the communication strategy. And the last point you just raised, Chair, about tracking the cost and use of grants in terms of judging whether change is sustainable.
I think there was also something that I think you mentioned, Councillor Seaborn, about some indicators of success. So thinking about indicators of success, what success looks like, etc. I think that was a fair point, yes?
Yeah, didn't some of us raise the complexity of the various lists, Marmot, etc., etc. That
Yeah.
Not just me raise that.
Fair point.
I don't know how you raise
Sorry.
it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Councillor Seaborn, could you just put a little bit more meat on the bones when you say about the outcomes and measures, what it is you'd like to recommend in that respect?
I think it was also picked up by Councillor Panera. It is about strengthening the performance management, monitoring and reporting mechanisms to say, you know, what good looks like. How do we actually
Good point.
how do you actually measure success?
Yeah, maybe milestones along the way that we would expect to hit or something like that.
Yeah.
Helpful.
Yeah. Can I, when you got that one, can I go back to this complexity of all the different measures we've got in there? Because I thought the Chief Executive said it, but somebody else raised it as well. I still think we got a lot of measures in there. It wasn't just me that raised it.
Yeah, I think, but again, it's trying to understand what's that in terms of a recommendation. If I have a go, it's actually it was actually sort of clear explanation for members as to how the elements of this, the deal, are connected to the county plan and to the other, if you like, and the communication strategy, those things that already extend within the council. Is that a fair point?
Well,
We've
yeah,
got a
great,
risk of overload, I think you were suggesting.
Yes. And we got to put it over as the main point.
Yeah, and it's just I'm conscious, obviously they've stated that they're going to be developing measures and outcomes. So it's just in terms of my understanding and what you would recommend, how you want those to be, because they're already going to be developing those. So what specifically would you like them to address in action in your recommendation?
Bex would like it so that we can understand it, because that side of it, I think, is quite complex.
So is it more around the point of when they are evaluating their measures and their performance against these, like you mentioned about the case studies, perhaps how they report it back to members there, in terms of showing the impact of the deal and the objectives and the measures that they're putting forward? Would that be?
I think that's very helpful. All agree with
that?
Yes,
I think so, very much so.
I think it's obviously developing a stronger, you said we did, accountability. You know, you said it, we did it. And is that satisfying or satisfied?
It's something we can all own. It's about ownership.
I think the you said we did was, I think, a point that I did suggest to Neil in a pre-meeting, keeping language simple. So I think that's a key part of our recommendations. I'm conscious of time and the other commitments that members may have. So are you happy that we draw together those recommendations, circulate them to you in the usual way, and you can make any comments? Is that fair?
Yeah.
So I'll say
well done.
Thank you very much, members, for all the comments. We have a range of things that we can put together for recommendations. So item 6 on the agenda is the date of the next meeting. So we have the joy of coming together again on the 23rd of October 2025, when we'll be scrutinising the Council's Climate and Nature Emergency Annual Performance Report. And I'm sure you will do, as you have done today, come up with plenty of questions and observations. Thank you very much. Meeting closed.
Yes.